So today I wanted to talk about how an INFP, such as myself, views INFJs. Sometimes people get the two personality types confused because we do have a lot of similarities, but there are some things that make us pretty different. Um, so I just wanted to talk about some of the things that we INFPs typically love about our INFJ friends, and then some of the things that can bother us about them. Okay, so first we'll start off with the positive. I kind of view a lot of INFJs who I know as like real life superheroes because they don't just see a problem and then keep going, but they see a problem and they fix it. Whether that problem is like a person who has a flat tire, they usually are the kind who will stop and help that person, even if it's a complete stranger. Um, they're always the person who pops into your head, like if you're stranded or if you need help, you're like, who on earth would help me? Usually it's an INFJ that comes to mind because it's like they live to help other people. They're not just talk, but they really they're about action when it comes to helping others, and they have the energy to do it. Like with INFPs, I feel like we want to help other people. At least most of us do. Some of us can be kind of narcissistic, but you know, most of us do have this deep desire to help other people, but we don't have a lot of energy when it comes to like the social aspect involved in helping another person. But INFJs, even though they're introverts, they're able, like they somehow have the energy to constantly help people. And I'm super impressed by their superhero like quality when it comes to that. Another thing that I really like about them that goes hand in hand with that is their compassion for others. It's it's so deep. It's really really deep. Um, when they are listening to or looking at another person so as to try and understand them, they do it with a compassion that's very rare. Um, and it's what helps them to act in other people's behalf because they feel an empathy for them that most people wouldn't. Um, INFJs are the type to like reach out to someone who's homeless and help them. Um, they're just really amazing when it comes to compassion and empathy. Another thing that I admire about INFJs, which is very different from INFPs, is that they're so well mannered most of the time. Like INFPs, we tend to just, even though we never intentionally want to hurt people, sometimes we say the first thing that pops into our mind and we don't think about it until afterwards. We're like, oh no, I think I hurt that person's feelings, or I said something that was um, politically incorrect, which I do all the time, or just insensitive. We don't think before we speak sometimes. But INFJs are very careful when it comes to manners, and they think before they speak most of the time. So that's something that I really admire about them, and I wish that came naturally to me. It's something that I'm trying to work on improving in myself. But they just like, it seems like they just know to do that automatically. Another great thing about them is their creativity. Um, like a lot of INFJs are into the arts when it comes to like filmmaking or music or painting, drawing, things like that. And they're really good at it because they get so invested into whatever it is that they're interested in, um, that they tend to master it. And they don't just master it as if it were some what's the word, like a science project, but they master it not just with their head but with their heart, is what I'm trying to say. So that allows for them to be super creative, and put their own spin on things while they're learning about a particular area of the arts. So yeah, I just really admire their creativity. They're willing to think outside of the box when it comes to art and things like that. Another thing that I admire about them is that they're really smart most of the time, like book smart, and that's because of their curiosity. Even though they may not get like the best grades in school, they tend to know a lot about various subjects because once they want to learn something, they will study it like crazy. And like I said before, when it comes to the arts, they'll master it. So this leads to them just knowing a lot of like random facts. In fact, that makes me wonder if like a lot of the Jeopardy winners are INFJs because they just know a lot of stuff because they do their own personal research and study when it comes to their fields of interest. And it ends up making them really, really smart. And also another good thing about them is they're not just book smart, but because of the way that they think, they're able to, when they learn something, they connect it with something else that they've learned. They connect it with something that they feel. They connect it with like a cultural norm. So they make all these connections between the things that they're learning. And that's what makes them different from someone who just knows facts, cold facts. An INFJ is the kind of person who's kind of like wise because they take knowledge and they put it into action. Their knowledge doesn't just stay stagnant, but it kind of like grows. They add it to what they already know and use it to improve their lives and the lives of people around them. They're just really, they're really cool. They're like what humans should be when it comes to learning. Another thing that I have on my little list here of things that I like about INFJs is that they're very driven. Thing about INFPs is like we can be driven, but usually it's in our head. And while we're daydreaming, we're like super driven. But sometimes it's hard to translate that passion that's in our head and hearts into actual action for us INFPs. But INFJs, it seems like it's easier for them to take something that they're a plan and to put it into action. Like they're doers. So I really admire their drive to get things done. That said, they're not perfect, and the INFJs who I've come to really, really like, I've also noticed that they have some strong negative qualities that do bother me. To start off with, they're very hard on themselves. Like, my INFJ friends and family members, when I give them a compliment, I feel stupid after I give them a compliment because they don't accept it. And it almost makes me feel like they're looking down on me because they don't value the fact that I value them. And I know that that's because they're so hard on themselves. Like one INFJ told me that it made him uncomfortable when I gave him a compliment because it made him worry that he would get arrogant. And I do, well, I understand that. I just don't think I just don't think that's very balanced. When someone praises you out of sincerity, I think you should accept it. It doesn't mean that you're better than everyone else. It just means that you're doing something right in this moment. You might mess up in the next moment, but in this moment right now, you're doing something right. And to tell that person thank you is actually doing a kindness to them, because it makes them feel good that they made you feel good. So yeah. Also, I think it's dangerous emotionally that just how hard INFJs are on themselves. Because it like sometimes pushes them into a depression and like a panic mode that can go down some destructive avenues, some very self-destructive avenues. So it's something they need to be careful of, being too critical of themselves. A second thing that I noticed is that they can be very naive, as smart as they are. They can be super naive when it comes to people who are trying to manipulate them. And I think this is because they're so kind and compassionate that when they see someone who is, insincere, it's hard for them to see past that mask, because they're so sincere themselves. I could be wrong, but I think might be what the problem is. That they can't see past that mask of insincerity, and they don't realize when they're being used or when they're being lied to, in quite a few cases. And they kind of see that person the way they want to. So yeah, and it kind of upsets me. And usually I'll point it out to my INFJ friends, and they will or family member, and they'll fight me tooth and nail over it. And eventually I'm just like, okay, fine, whatever. But yeah, sometimes they can be naive when it comes to the fact that other people are using them for their kindness. The third thing I've noticed is that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes for the sake of peace, they don't say what's on their mind. Even though INFJs are pretty direct, they do this thing where when they're upset with me, when my friend or family member is upset with me, they'll smile at me, but it's like this tight, weird smile, and I can tell they're horribly angry with me. And if I ask them what's wrong, they'll say nothing and keep that weird little smile, because it's almost like they're afraid of making things worse by communicating. But for me, an INFP, communication is vital. I can't stand fakeness. And I know that the INFJ is not trying to be fake. They're just trying to be peaceable, but I think that's more self-destructive in the long run. Like, you have to talk things out. If I'm doing something that bothers you, you have to tell me so that I can not do it. Or so that I can explain to you why my behavior is the way it is. And then maybe that can lead to an understanding that'll improve our relationship. So yeah, there's a little breakdown in communication sometimes because they are so well mannered and so careful with other people's feelings. Another thing, and this is one of the worst things that really, really bothers me, and that has the potential of ending a friendship with an INFJ, is that they can be know-it-alls. Because they are usually because they're able to see past, I'm not saying this correctly, because they're usually correct about what makes people tick. Like, they're able to look at a person and understand why they are the way they are 75% of the time. Just like INFPs are usually really good at that. but we're not always correct. And I think INFPs are a little bit better at this because we tend to, instead of talking over other people, because we assume that we know everything about them, we might say what we have to say and then shut up because we realize there could be stuff that we're missing. But with INFJs, one thing that I really notice is that they make quick decisions about who a person is, and even though a lot of what they think is correct, there's a whole lot that they don't know that they are incorrect about because they don't know that person's full story. And instead of listening, they just assume that they know everything. And I get it. I mean, if you're used to being really, really smart, you just assume you know, you got this, you know this. But when it comes to learning about people, there is always more to the story. So that's why we always have to listen to each other. And this is a huge problem with some of my INFJ family members. They don't listen enough. If I say I feel a certain way, they say, oh, well, you feel that way because blah, blah, blah. And that feeling is wrong because you should feel blah, blah, blah instead. They don't even listen to why I feel the way they feel. And their assumption as to why I feel that way is wrong. And they'll never know that because they never let me finish my sentence. So yeah, they can be know-it-all sometimes. Another thing that could end a friendship with an INFJ for an INFP for sure is that INFJs can surprisingly be very controlling. And I know this is a behavior that's typically associated with ENFJs, but INFJs and ENFJs are very much alike from what I've observed, in that they both have so much energy. And that energy, coupled with their deep compassion for people and wanting the best for everyone around them, when you put those two things together, they are huge motivators, which is a good thing. Like, they'll be the one to tell you, you need to go to the gym to lose that excess weight, except the INFJ will put it in a much nicer way because they're so polite. But they will push and push and push and keep pushing until the INFP will want to punch them in the face. Like, because it becomes too much. Like, they start trying to make changes in another person's life, which is crossing a boundary. Like, I think sometimes because they're so used to knowing so much, and thinking that they have a lot of the answers, that they try to push their opinions on other people as if their opinions were fact. And it can be dangerous to a friendship or to a relationship. And I think INFJs need to be careful of that. And it again goes back to just kind of stepping back and listening to the other person. Let them express themselves. Let them tell you what they want to do, what their next step in life is, instead of you telling them what it should be. Just listen. And last but not least, this is something that I think INFJs and INFPs definitely have in common. When they're stressed out and super anxious, they resort to seeing life in black and white. Like, they make, as an INFP, for example, when someone makes me very, very angry, I categorize that person, which is horrible, and I know it's stupid, but I categorize that person as bad. And to simplify my life, because I'm so angry, and this is very out of character for me, I start to divide everything in my life because I'm like the dark side of being an INFP. I'll be like, okay, this is bad, this is good, and that is the way life is right now. And I become almost like militant about my perspective of the world and the way people should be. And I'm like that for a good little while until I get over being angry with this person. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often. I've noticed that INFJs tend to do the same thing. When someone in their life who they care about um, does something to offend them or does something to hurt someone who they love, it's like it flip switches, and they start to see everything in black and white. This is good, this is bad. You fall into one of two categories, and they become like super militant about one thing that I've heard them become militant about is you should not be lazy. Laziness is horrible. Like get on a soapbox when it comes to that. So yeah, I think that we both fall into that trap because it makes life a little bit easier to deal with when you simplify everything. But it's not good in the long run because it means you shut out a lot of people and a lot of potential life experiences when you oversimplify everything and say this is either good or bad. Have to learn to see life the way it is in all of its colors and gray areas. So yeah, I think INFJs are really, really amazing people and I admire them. And the negative qualities, everybody has negative qualities, but we just have to learn to overcome them and to work with each other and be better people. Just like I'm sure there are tons of things wrong with INFPs. Like we're talked about as that we're always so gentle and sweet, but that's not true. We can be manipulative and whiny and narcissistic. So yeah, I don't. I would understand if an INFJ made a video about all the things that they don't like about INFPs. Totally understandable. Alright, well thanks for watching, and if there are some things that you like about INFJs, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. Bye!